Hello friends, I am so sorry that I haven't posted any video content now for several years, and I'd like to try to make up for that today with a short video about something that I've been thinking about and working on in the last several months, which is Aristotelian leisure. So let's get into that. So Aristotle's philosophy of leisure is tied to his broader understanding of human flourishing, right? So flourishing for Aristotle is rational self-direction towards virtue. Okay. And in this context, Aristotle thought that most people tend to misuse their leisure time if they haven't learned how to spend it meaningfully. So people tend to prefer to spend their non-working hours on trivial pleasures and amusements, and which is not a new thing since he was writing about this in ancient Greece, and it's probably still true today. But learning to use leisure time for growth-oriented pursuits can really improve our lives. So how do we define leisure in the Aristotelian sense? Well, for Aristotle, leisure isn't simply about taking breaks from work or escaping work. It's actually the most fundamental aspect of a life well lived. So Aristotelian leisure encompasses not just the types of things that we would think about leisure today, like hobbies and sports and trivial amusements, but rather everything broadly that we do outside of work. So this includes relaxing after work, things like eating, sleeping, and also amusements to avoid boredom. But more importantly, it's also high value activities that include, things like forming relationships with others, enjoying the arts, spending time on exercise and intellectual contemplation, spending time in nature, crafts, civic association, enjoyment of fine food and drink, friendship, and other beneficial and meaningful activities, okay? And at the core of Aristotle's ethics is the concept of eudaimonia. And this is translated often as flourishing or well-being. And it's basically that the ultimate human goal is living in accordance with reason and achieving a life of virtue. So to reach eudaimonia, one must engage in activities that are fulfilling, meaningful, and promote personal growth. So in this context, leisure is not a passive activity, but deeply connected with the active cultivation of one's intellect and virtues. And in the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle writes, "To be always seeking after amusement is a sign of levity and not of serious purpose." And so in today's world, we tend to view leisure as idle entertainment or just as a break from work. But the concept of Aristotelian leisure offers a much richer understanding of what we really should be doing with our leisure time. And that is the pursuit of sort of high value and growth oriented things, intellectual development, moral development, and not just passive distraction. It's not to say that you can't spend some time on that, but it's not the most important part of leisure. And so, in essence, Aristotle's view of leisure encourages us to think more of leisure as a time for self-improvement and exploration and the cultivation of virtues, rather than merely a time just to rest from work. So he believes that leisure is essential for things that are vital for living a good life, okay? Like I mentioned before, friendship, exercise, eating well, shared activities that promote mutual flourishing between people. So obviously, Aristotle acknowledged that like today, we have to work. Productive labor is necessary for survival. And most people in the ancient world, in ancient Greece in particular, worked tremendously hard. All basic tasks had to be done by hand. But Aristotle thinks that this type of work, or work in general, can be virtuous if done with the right intentions. But still, work is secondary to leisure in the Aristotelian sense, right? So work shouldn't dominate a person's life to the point where there's no room for leisure. Because without leisure, your person is unable to engage with activities that lead to personal fulfillment and virtue. So thinking about leisure generally in this way can be helpful for several reasons, since a lot of people feel kind of burnout in our work-centered modern culture. But from an Aristotelian perspective, you don't need to be defined by your job or your career, but rather what you choose to do with your non-working hours, right? This is good news for several reasons. And the first one is that reality is that only a minority of us are lucky enough to be able to make a living doing what we love. And that's just the reality of life. Most of us have to work to get by, but it's leisure that is truly more important than work for a good life. So it doesn't matter if you're truly satisfied with your career or if you currently aren't working or whatever your situation is, because really it's leisure that's more important. Okay. And also, if you work a lot, you likely have more leisure time available to you than the average person in Aristotle's day. Since we have modern appliances and conveniences, which free up a lot more of our time for meaningful leisure. So just to wrap up here, from this perspective, our decision to make high quality leisure choices are more significant than we might realize. Aristotle thought that how we spend our non-working hours defines who we are, the kind of life that we will have, and more importantly, the type of society that we build. So thanks for listening. I'm glad to be back doing this. And please subscribe if you haven't already. And hopefully I will make more videos soon. Thanks for watching.